Welcome to CyberBytes, the podcast. I'm your host, Joseph Cooper, co-founder of Aspiron Search. Today's guest, we have Brett Galloway, CEO at AttackIQ. Brett is an experienced entrepreneur and executive who has brought together technology, product, and business expertise to innovate and deliver a stream of successful product businesses over his career. Enjoy the episode. How are you, man?
Doing great. And how are you?
I'm all right. Busy away. I think we had the biggest Q3 to date as a firm, and Q4's revving up nicely. So doing really well. How about you? I know I missed you at Black Cat, didn't I? Unfortunately, how you been?
We've had a great summer. Our quarter is nearly done with 1 month to go, so we're having a great quarter too. Had a great summer. Was able to go to Europe. And family's doing well too, so all's good. I appreciate your asking.
Was you in London, or was it where did you?
No, we went to Paris and Florence. Been to London before.
Okay, yeah. And whereabouts are you actually based at the moment? Where's home
I'm
for
based
you?
in the San Francisco Bay Area, so I live and work in Los Altos, California. We're a fully virtual company, which is great.
Yeah, nice.
So the office you're looking at is actually my work office too.
Quality. Well, great. Look, before we talk about AttackIQ and what you guys are getting up to with all my guests, I like to go back to where it all began and sort of how you got into the industry. Because I know you've got a very interesting story.
Yeah, so I came over here to the Bay Area. I grew up in Central California to go to college and never left. And it turned out Silicon Valley was a great place to build a career. Who knew? And so I ended up largely down the startup path. First startup I joined as a software engineer. By the time I left, I was running engineering. We built a large scale wireless data network for laptop communication. And this was in an era before cellular 3G. So there was no way to get data on the road. So I built that and rolled it out. A guy that worked for me and I ended up leaving to build another company together, a company called Packeteer, which for which I'm forever grateful. It was a great experience, financially very rewarding. That actually, the sale of Packeteer stock actually paid for the house that I'm sitting in. So
Nice.
pretty cool. And I ended up leaving there to so that company I was co-founder and COO and VP of engineering. So I was a software engineer when I did real work. And then the next company I joined as CEO, which was joined a friend of mine. So it's not founder of that. It's a company called Airspace. And that company grew even faster. And we ended up, I swore that I wouldn't sell that company, and then I sold it to Cisco. And so I had to explain to the employees how it was that I came to sell the company. Now, the reality is they just made me an offer I couldn't refuse. But what I explained was not that Cisco had acquired us, but we had acquired their enterprise wireless business to accelerate the achievement of our $1 billion revenue goal. And they were the market leader in that business. Airspace was merged into it. They asked me to run that. So my job at Cisco then was to integrate the thing that I had just been running. And in fact, it did accelerate the achievement of our $1 billion revenue goal. And that was great. I ended up staying at Cisco a number of years. I had promised them 2 years. With the acquisition, I stayed 6.5 because they kept promoting me and I kept working on stuff. I had been in and around the security business for my whole career. In fact, the inspiration for Packeteer was Cisco buying a company called Network Address Translation, which was the foundation of their PIX firewall, which is the foundation of the ASA firewall. But I've been more in networking. But at Cisco, I ended up responsible for security, and the CISO of Cisco worked for me. And that was incredibly illuminating to me because I had always been a vendor. Right. As a vendor, you build stuff, you sell stuff, and the customers use it. And John was a practitioner. And so it was incredibly interesting to me to get his perspective on cybersecurity. Interesting and terrifying. And the terrifying part was John was doing a bunch of work with other companies, the government, on cybersecurity, and he read me in on a bunch of work that he was doing. And I left those briefings terrified. Absolutely terrified, because I suddenly realized, oh crap, this is not a them problem, it's a we problem. We are all vulnerable. If you think about the Colonial Pipeline hack, right? Fuel delivery was delivered for lots of people. who probably never even heard of the company Colonial Pipeline. They never knew they were dependent on a bunch of poorly defended computer systems. That's true of all of us. We're dependent on thousands of companies that are poorly defended. And, in that case, the bad guys apologize. They didn't even mean to disrupt operations. You imagine what would happen if somebody really meant ill. And, the part of the reason I was terrified is I had sort of a deep belief that, the security problem in enterprises was unsolved. That in fact, cybersecurity exposure was pretty bad. And this isn't a statement about our products, right? I mean, it's a very hard problem, and obviously, in the intervening decade, companies have invested enormously to address this problem, which is great. People should. And I read a study earlier in the year at CFOs, and this is a period where people are still hugely worried about a recession. And the CFOs identified the number one risk, not economic conditions, not a recession, but cyber attack, cybersecurity, which tells you something about the business risk here. And so I ended up talking to this company, AttackIQ. And I ultimately left Cisco. The last time I quit, John wasn't able to talk me out of it, and did a startup Germinator. And was happily working on that. And I had been working for a long time. My kids were growing up, so it was a chance for me to actually, just have more time with my kids, not working full time. But I met this company, AttackIQ, and AttackIQ uniquely got my interest because it actually provided a viable answer to the question, why is cybersecurity so poor and what can we do to fix it? Now, I know many companies say this, and ultimately, the problem is solved by all of us working together. But AttackIQ really illuminated a blind spot. And that blind spot is that if you think about yourself as a CISO, right, the number one job is to defend the organization against attack. And so in order to do that, what do you have? You have a bunch of vulnerable assets, and you work really hard to try to make them not vulnerable, but they're always going to be vulnerable. And that's why you put in layers of technical security controls to detect or block the adversary's attempt to try to get at those vulnerable assets. And the problem is that those security controls fail way too often. Verizon's estimate was 82% of successful breaches should have been stopped by an existing control that didn't. And that sounds like sort of a hard to believe statistic given where the industry has gone. But if you think more deeply, you can understand why that is. And the fact is, if you think about simple control like an alarm system, maybe an alarm system in your office, how do you know the alarm systems are working? Well,
very true.
Got to try it.
Yeah.
And you try and it works. That's great. If you try and it doesn't work, why might not it work? Well, it might not work because the sensor got disconnected because the guy painting clipped the wire or something. It might not work because the battery ran down. Right? It might not work. It might work, but the communication link to the monitoring system is down. How would you know any of those failures had happened? Well, you got to try it. Now, the technical security controls that enterprises deploy to defend themselves against the adversary are like the alarm system, only they're more complicated, they have more failure modes, and they exist in much higher volume. And the reality is people just don't test them very often. We have people will certainly run penetration tests, they'll run red teaming, but the amount of testing that people do ends up being, like 1%, 2%, 3%, 4% per year, meaning that, errors can persist for years and years and years and years and go undetected. Now, it's pretty easy to knock the plug out of the wall on something. It's pretty hard to knock the plug back into the wall. So once broken, they tend to stay broken. And the truth is, red teaming is a great practice, but red teaming is never going to test enough at enough scale to get to deal with this problem. There's really only one solution to the problem, and that is to use automated testing, and that's what we do. Okay. So the mission of AttackIQ is what drew me to the company, to make the world safe for compute by addressing this enormous blind spot.
Yeah, nice. So what category is this? Like a breach and a attack simulation? What category does AttackIQ fall under?
It's a great question. So Gartner named our category breach and attack simulation. And so that's the category we compete in. The name is descriptive of the technology. And in fact, what we do is we much as my example of the alarm, right? The way to test whether control is working against some adversary behavior is you replicate the adversary behavior and see what it does. And so that's the attack simulation part. But our core use case is focused on technical security control validation.
Got it.
And it's that use case, and there's other technology you have to deploy in order to do that. You think about the alarm case. It's not just enough to break, move the window and see if the alarm goes off. You all got to listen and see if the alarm went off. So, we also do integrations to your SIM or those controls to see whether the detection or the prevention actually happened. And so what we end up reporting to our user then is kind of a closed loop assessment of a particular control in the context of a particular adversary behavior.
Got it. So you've been there, what, 5, 6 years now? How long have you been?
5 years in November.
Is it 5? Yeah.
Anniversary. Living the dream, living the startup dream.
Yeah, absolutely.
I ran an enormous org at Cisco, but I frankly like startups better. I was chatting with my son last night, and he works for a startup that was acquired by a big company, and he was going on at great length about how different they were culturally.
Yeah.
There's speed and responsiveness and care about and alignment and so on. And it's just it's very hard to change the world in a large company, whereas our objective at AttackIQ literally is to change the world, right? Address major cause of cybersecurity breaches.
Yeah, such a unique DNA working for a startup. So you didn't co-found AttackIQ. How old is the business, and when did you then eventually join?
So the company is 10 years old, roughly.
Yeah.
I joined 5 years ago, so well into their journey.
Yeah.
Isn't that important to me that it be my idea? I mean, I come up with good ideas. I come up with bad ideas, but frankly, ideas are kind of overrated, right? I think Edison said your genius is, 2% inspiration, 98% perspiration. That's absolutely true, right? It's the execution of the idea that matters, and so, I like the team, I like the mission, and, I liked the problem space. I mean, I think, clearly, we're not a charity, so we're in business to create value for our customers and create value for our investors and for ourselves, and that's the deal. And it's a great experience. Both at Packeteer and Airspace, it was wonderful to be able to talk to an employee about how they were able to use stock sales to pay off their house, or accomplish some other life objective that they would not have otherwise been able to do.
How have things evolved over the last 5 years?
Well, we've grown the business a lot. Our product has gotten a lot more sophisticated. We have historically sold, mostly to large enterprises. We sell software to pretty sophisticated security organizations so they can actually stand up a security control validation program. We've recently announced some pretty exciting products that I think really extend the reach of the technology. One of the mega stories in security in the last couple of years have been services, right? Security is complicated. We're seeing the growth of MDR, managed service providers, who are able to help many customers deal with the complexity of defending themselves better than they could do by themselves, given the complexity of the solutions, given the obvious talent shortages, et cetera. So our solution was very, very large enterprise focused. But we realized, as we continue to work, we built a lot of intellectual property around sort of the practice of security control validation. What kinds of things, if you test them, you tend to find broken, et cetera. And so earlier this year, we launched a product called AttackIQ Ready.
Yep.
So it's a breach and attack simulation as a service solution, where you just deploy, one or a small number of our agents, and we run it. So the experience is much more like a pen test. We hire, a company to do a pen test of our stuff periodically. Mm-hmm. And what do we get? Well, we hire them and they send us a report, and we count on them to know what to test, and we hope they did a good job. Now we know what to test, at least at baseline level. And so the customer experience of Ready is they install this to get a report. And so obviously the idea is to be able to extend the reach of our solution to companies that can't really stand up their own program. So we're pretty excited about that.
Mhm.
This also opens up new routes to market for us as a solution that's much more suitable for partners. So there's a lot of interest in the solution from managed service providers, uh, cyber insurance providers, um, and so we're pretty excited about that.
Yeah.
Even enterprise customers have a use case for this. We have one customer, for example, that um, is not able to deploy agents in their entire infrastructure, and so and this really leads into the last product that we deployed that we showed at Black Hat, which is AttackIQ Flex,
Mhm.
which is a downloadable agentless solution. So you basically just download a test, run a test, and get a report. And so we're pretty excited about that product too. As a way for people to get a taste of our technology, for enterprise customers, ability to test in places in their network where they can't deploy agents, kind of a test in a briefcase sort of solution. Um, and we think the combination of our enterprise product Ready and Flex really democratizes testing, and really makes security control validation something that anybody can do.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, the CISOs are looking to save time and money, right? I did see on your website you are quite open about how you are saving money for your customers. How exactly do you do that?
It's a great question, and we actually hired analyst firm to answer the question: how do you create value for customers? Value measured in dollars, not value measured in amorphous marketing speak.
Mm,
And there were three basic buckets of value that our customers identified. One was obviously improvements in their risk posture, and that's great because that's the whole point of the company and the product. So I'm glad they said that. Two was actually our AttackIQ Academy. AttackIQ enjoys a deep relationship with the MITRE Center for Threat Informed Defense, which is the public-private partnership that MITRE created to further develop the attack matrix. We're co-founding research partners of that. And so that's one way in which we give back to the community. Another way we give back is our academy. And so this is an online learning community of highly consumable, but very high quality training content in various practices in and around our product. For example, one thread there is we'll do like training on the various projects that the MITRE Center does. We have a learning path on purple teaming, obviously learning path on MITRE ATT&CK, learning path on BAS, of course. And these are not AttackIQ commercials. This is actual
mm,
consumable content for credit. And so anyhow, so what they identified was the avoided cost of security training by using Academy was a significant value driver. So that was cool.
yeah,
And the
absolutely.
third source of value was staff savings. And the staff savings they identified was staff savings on the red team. And that's, okay, I guess. We're not, it isn't really our objective to reduce people's investment in red teaming. I think red teaming is a good, important practice. But certainly, to the extent that, people could optimize their budgets, sometimes they did that. The second was improvements in cost of purple teaming. And purple teaming is an integrated exercise between the blue team, defensive team, and the red team to assess security posture. And clearly our product in some sense is a purple team in a box. So it's going to be much cheaper to run a security control assessment with AttackIQ, and you can do it much more often, of course, than a purple team exercise. But the third was the most interesting, which is savings in the SOC, Security Operations Center. And I frankly was surprised. Like, what? Where did that come from? But if you think about it, you realize that as a company, we're very focused on false negative errors, right? The case of a real attack that's slipping through the net, and of course, those are the cases that kill you. So that's really important. And so, what does our product do? It puts in place a feedback loop so people can reduce false negative errors. But it turns out with a good feedback loop, you reduce false positive errors as well, right? Cases where it's not an attack, but it got detected. But your SOC staffing levels are largely the product of your environment size by your false positive rate. So if you bring the false positive rate down, you bring staffing levels down. It was over 30% reduction. So it was a material reduction just by having a good feedback loop on your security controls.
Nice. With such a big mission and such a big problem space, like what, because obviously there are other startups popping up as well. I know you're like a bit further along Series C. There's a few Series A popping up, as you know, but um, as cyber attacks are obviously increasing, it's getting more sophisticated. Like, how are you guys evolving with that at Attack IQ?
It's a great question. You know, the the good news is that adversary behaviors do not evolve anywhere near as quickly as vulnerabilities, for example. So new vulns pop all the time, right? I just updated my iPhone because of some new 0 days. Whereas, certainly the MITRE attack matrix is expanding, but it's expanding much more slowly. And that's good because you're deploying security controls. And if the adversary behaviors were evolving rapidly, you wouldn't have anything you could do because those controls just can't evolve that quickly. So adversary behavior is more stable. And furthermore, the fact that the MITRE attack matrix exists means that our customers don't have to trust that we somehow have like deep and proprietary knowledge of adversaries. The truth is, the whole industry knows, and adversaries know what techniques work, and they keep using them over and over again. So the first answer is, some sense, there's really nothing new except pervasive failure. And to that point, we did a survey of our customers, and over 75% of the customers, over 70% of the customers reported at least 25% of their controls weren't working at all. And many more than 25, right? 30, 40, 50. I mean, one customer reported on a blended basis, 65% of their controls were not working. This is not Joe's Pizza Parlor. These are large, sophisticated enterprises that have pervasive security control failure. So I think that's actually the real story here. And the vendors obviously are continuing to adapt, and we're continuing to develop, extend our content library. But our real focus as a business is on just extending the scope of our solution so our customers can test more customers can test more effectively.
Yeah. Was there any feedback as to why those particular enterprises did have such a high percentage of security controls not working? Like, was there any particular reasons for that?
I mean, it's all the reasons, right? Sometimes, the products are misconfigured. All too frequently, people assume that products are magic boxes, but they need to be tuned. Our dominant deployment model is SaaS, so we actually have access to our customers' test results. Obviously, we protect those very carefully, but we have mechanisms to anonymize that data and analyze it internally. And so we did that, and we looked at a series of very well-known techniques, and in this case, it was against endpoint controls. That we know for a fact, the major brands of endpoint controls can detect, right? So we didn't pick anything funky or new or weird, and still there was a high rate of failure in the field in customers' production environments. And it sort of comes back to the staff savings thing. The truth is, in order to use these products, particularly detection controls, you really have to get an understanding of your gun, right? You really need to know what behaviors make sense in your environment and what don't, and you got to tune these things. And the point is, without a good feedback loop, that tuning does not happen. And then if it doesn't happen, then you just leave it in your default setting, and the false positive, which is tuned for low false positive rates, and then lots of stuff slips by.
Insane.
So that's one reason. Another reason is all IT systems are subject to entropy, right? Things break, things get misconfigured, things get turned off, and that just happens at some rate over time, and so things fail. In some cases, sometimes even the products are bad. We had one customer, who tested their DLP solution, and it just didn't work, did not do what it said on the side of the tin, so they were kind of upset. But I'd say, this is not really about vendor testing. It's really about, equipping our customers to be able to use, what are, in the main good, solid products, but complicated products, in a really effective way.
Yeah, awesome. Brett, is there anything you'd like to finish up on in particular? I know you've obviously announced the two recent product releases. Anything else in the pipeline coming up? Anything else you'd like to finish on?
Well, so good question. Probably the last thought is, I do think this is an important enough problem that we're starting to see moves on the regulatory side. Historically, the compliance frameworks for cybersecurity have been almost exclusively capability oriented. Look, for example, the NIST framework, right? It's basically, do you do this? Do you do this? And it's just a list of check marks.
Yeah.
Those check marks are created by interviewing people. And increasingly, third parties and regulators are coming to realize that a green check mark doesn't actually mean that much, right? Is it shelfware? Is it plugged in? Is it working? And those are all the questions that, obviously we answer. And so, CISA, for example, is now routinely recommending U.S. government cybersecurity agency, CISA, that companies do production security control validation. In Europe, DORA is requiring companies to assess their security posture. So we're seeing in a number of countries, a number of ways, organizations realize that it's really important to make sure this stuff is really working. And this certainly explains why there's also interest in our solution from a cyber insurance perspective. Cyber insurance underwriting risk is high, prices are going up. And so the only real way to mitigate underwriting risk is with visibility and measurement.
Awesome. Brett, thanks for coming on the show, my man. And I wish you all the best of success and hopefully for another acquisition.
Well, you're welcome. In the end, I'm not focused on an acquisition. I'm focused on creating value for myself and my customers. If we sell the company and we can accomplish the mission, that's great. If we go public and we accomplish the mission, that's great. But it's ultimately about the mission.
Love that. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening. If you've enjoyed today's show, please like and share with your friends and colleagues, as this is really important for the show's reach. If you'd like to be our next guest or are interested in Aspiron Search's staffing solutions, please get in touch directly with me or reach out to us via our website www.aspironsearch.com.